take a good look at this radiator here. And the heat is on, as you can hear it actually running pretty well. Now, as you can see, this is a very, very old, rare, antique radiator. Very thick sections. As a matter of fact, the sections are so close in between that you can't even get your pinky finger in between both of the sections. That's how thick they are. Very old radiator. This is rare, almost antique. It's not very tall. It's very short, kind of like a short, fat little radiator. But it kicks off a shitload of heat. It's probably about maybe 1.5 feet in height, but it is very wide. It is deep in it's deep in diameter from wall to one end. From here to here is approximately about 12.5 to damn near 13 inches in width. So that tells you you're dealing with a pretty wide radiator. You see its rear design and build. You see how it has fins in between its sections, which allows it to kick off massive or distribute massive amounts of heat. And you're probably getting equivalent to what a couple of radiators will give you in a smaller size with this one radiator. This thing is heavy as hell, for the record. Getting it on this platform, the first time I lifted it on here, it took 2 people, me and one of my homeboys, to actually lift it on the stand. The second time, I don't know how the hell I managed to do it, but I managed to lift it by myself. And this was many years ago, and I wasn't big like I am now or whatever. So some might say, oh, you're a big guy, so you can lift this with no problem. No, I was a skinny dude at that time, and it took me a lot of hee-hawing to do this. Now, I've bought this radiator and I refurbished it. I bought it at a plumber supply store, and I got it for a very cheap price. When I first purchased it, it was a rust bucket. But I seen its potential. Most people would look at something like this, or look at it when it was first, or when I first seen it, and said, I don't want nothing to do with no rust bucket, no dingy looking ass radiator like that. But I'm a different type of cat. I like rare antique stuff. I don't like to have the typical same average stuff that everybody has in their house. It's not that often you're gonna go into somebody's home and see them with a radiator like this in here. Not even that many people really care about what kind of radiator you have, but me, this is just one of my pet peeves. These are one of the things I like to have that are nice, are good quality radiators. I don't really care for having the same stuff of what everyone else has. So I usually go after rare antique stuff with a rare design, and this is one of them. And you might see these in some museums or in some churches or areas where they're heating up massive areas, and these are usually about 8 feet long. I just happen to get lucky and find a smaller version of it. Now, the reason why I'm doing this video, when I first purchased this radiator, it only had 2 openings. The opening that you see in here with a cutoff valve going inside, this wasn't even there. This was a plug that was in here. And what I pretty much had to do was cut out my plug and put my 2.5 inch bushing along with the cutoff valve. So pretty much when I first purchased this radiator, it had only 2 openings. Up here, and what you can see is currently plugged, and down here. Don't get it fooled, because there's an air valve on here and you can actually hear it working well. But this air vent wasn't even here, or the opening wasn't even available when I first purchased the radiator. It was pretty much a plug inside of there, and I managed to twist it out with a pair of vice grips or pliers. As I mentioned in one of the previous videos, you can hear how this radiator is just venting out properly, or this Hoffman valve is giving off that mild hissing that I was talking about. And this is pretty much how you want your radiator to work. Now, the reason why I'm doing this video, because I notice a lot of people, when they purchase radiators, they don't know how to correctly install them. So what pretty much winds up happening is people wind up doing stuff, or in certain cases you can wind up cheating yourself out of heat. Now, I'm going to give you some quick tips on how you can install a radiator most efficiently on any type of heating system. 2-pipe steam, 1-pipe steam, hot water systems, open systems or closed systems, and this is currently an open system. So let me get right into it. When I first purchased the radiator, it only had this plug here, no air vent was here, and this here was plugged. This is not the original plug from when I first bought it. I removed it because I wanted to do some testing on hot water as well as steam to see exactly what the capabilities and the integrity of the radiator was. I think I bought it for like $140, which is really a steal for a radiator like this, and I was going to jump right on it. And I bought this maybe, what, almost 10 years ago, so I had it for a little while now. Now, from what you can hear, my radiator is currently heating up, and the fins are not completely hot, even though they're hot as hell. But the one thing that I go for whenever I have a radiator installation is I want a sufficient heating. When I say sufficient, I want heat from, and currently it starts from the bottom and works its way through the top. So I like all of these sections to be equivalent or damn near close to the same temperature, so I can get the best distribution of heat that I can get out of the radiator. How do you accomplish this? Now, one problem that I see a lot of people doing when they go to plumbing supply stores and they purchase a radiator, and they'll say, how do I install this radiator if I want to do it myself? And the plumber or the guy in the plumbing supply store or the hardware store will tell you, well, what you want to do if you have a one-pipe system, and let's just say with a one-pipe system for now. If you got a one-pipe system, what you pretty much want to do is get a bushing, because the radiators don't come with a plug. That's only if you're buying a brand new radiator. So if you're buying a brand new radiator, and we're going to run with that for a second, they're going to tell you 9 times out of 10, buy a bushing, 1.25 or 1.5 inch, whatever the size of the opening is for that radiator, buy a bushing of 1.25 by 1/8 of an inch. And what you basically do is install your air valve up here, or you take the little screw out on the top of the radiator and you put your air vent in there for a one-pipe steam heating system. That is a very, very bad connection. That installation, basically, you're not in any danger of having a leak or the radiator exploding on you, but what pretty much happens is you're shorting yourself of heat. Take a good look at how this radiator is assembled. This is how radiators were made a long time ago, and this is an American-made radiator. America no longer makes radiators from what I understand, but I believe Canada makes a radiator very similar to this. It's not an exact replica, but Canada makes something very close to it. But there's only one style of radiators like this, and American made them. Now the reason why I say that, take a look at the way this radiator was constructed, and even newer imported radiators are still constructed with the same setup. When you take a look at the slot for the air valve, what do you see? What is the common denominator here? The common denominator is the air vent is at the lowest portion of the radiator. There was a reason why they assembled it like that. There was a reason why they constructed the radiator like that years ago. Because they knew, whoever did it, or steam fitters that designed radiators, knew pretty much the flow of steam and how it travels. So pretty much what happens is, if you put an air vent on the top of the radiator here, what you have is heat coming in at a diagonal position. So you have maybe the first couple of sections that might be heated at full sufficiency, but then the rest of them are still lacking their fullest potential on what the radiator can truly be distributing. So you wind up having insufficient heat, and in a lot of cases people wonder why they're still cold, and that could be one of the very same reasons why you're cold. Now I get at certain occasions you have to make or improvise in certain situations, like me in one of my jobs or one of the apartments that I was working in. I had no choice on a steam system but to take out the air vent, which was located down here, and put an elbow and put a hot water automatic air vent on there. And the reason that I did that is because the line was improperly pitched and I was getting water coming out of the line, so they would get water spewing out of the radiator. So I had to make an improvise just to get that radiator hot and to keep the leaks from going on until they actually corrected the situation. But we're not talking about improvising right now. We're talking about a perfectly balanced, perfectly pitched steam heating system. And this is a perfectly pitched, perfectly balanced steam system, or one-pipe system. So what you basically do, anytime that you buy a brand new radiator, it always comes with a screw right over here where the air vent is supposed to go. Normally I would recommend using Gordon's, or you can use one of the smaller Gordons. I think it's a number 4 or number 5, which has the smallest opening, which would allow it to heat up sufficiently, but in certain cases that doesn't work. In this case, you see that I have a Hoffman on here. The reason why I have the Hoffman, again, because Hoffman gives the most sufficient venting on the radiator. This vent will not stop venting the radiator until all the air and all the cold or steam or moisture and vapors that are inside of this radiator have been successfully pushed out and out through the air vent, and all you have is a consistent flow of hot steam. Now when you listen to this air vent, it's not that loud, it's just a mild hissing like I described. You don't see any water leaking out of it, and I've had this vent on here for about over a year now. And you can see even where the opening is for the steam to to be released at, it's very clean, very shiny. I've never wiped it down, haven't polished it. You don't see any rust stains on it. That tells you that this is nice, clean, dry steam, and that this vent is working the way it's supposed to work. So whenever you buy a brand new radiator that you're connecting to a one-pipe steam heating system, there's a screw that goes in here. Now, normally it can come out with a flathead screwdriver or with a pair of Allen key set. What you want to do is when you purchase that radiator is make sure that you remove that screw before you even test or hook up the radiator or run any type of liquids into that radiator. Because once you heat the radiator up, once you send steam through it, once you pump hot water inside of it, that plug that's in there is going to freeze up on you, and you're not going to be able to get that out unless you drill it out with a drill bit. And then that becomes very complicated and difficult if you've never done it before, and you can take a very big chance in actually destroying your radiator. So what I recommend, anytime you purchase the radiator, take it out immediately. And normally with an Allen key or a flathead screwdriver, it would just squeeze, it would twist right out without a problem. Now, if you're not exactly sure what you're going to do when you first purchase the radiator, in certain cases when I purchase radiators, I'm not sure exactly what system I'm going to set them up on. What I'll do is I'll take the plug out and I'll wrap it with Teflon tape and put it back in. The reason why I wrap it with Teflon tape is because Teflon tape creates a seal, or it makes a barrier between the metals. That way I never have to worry about it freezing together. So that way I can put it in there and I can run steam in there. I can run hot water, and I never have to worry about a problem taking that plug back out. Anytime I need to remove it, it's that simple to just twist it back out, and I can apply it on any system that I want. The same thing goes for this plug here. You might see a lot of paint on here right now, but don't get it twisted, because at any given time I can come with a pair of pliers and I can easily remove this out of here without a problem. I'm just choosing not to. Now, like I said, anytime you buy a radiator and you're hooking it up to a one-pipe steam system, that is the only way you ever want to do it. I've seen some people actually hook it up in the worst way you can actually hook up a one-pipe radiator is by putting the cutoff valve here and having an air valve somewhere located up here on the same side as the radiator as the cutoff valve. That is a very bad connection. You cheat yourself out of so much heat, it is not even funny. And basically what you wind up having is just a steam circulation right in maybe these first 2 or maybe 3 sections, and you don't get the air out, and what you have is a radiator sitting inside of your apartment that is basically useless. And I've seen a couple of people do this, and I don't know how the hell people pull it off, but that is one way to severely cheat yourself out of steam or heat out of your radiator. So anytime you are connecting a one-pipe radiator, what you want to do is your cutoff valve and put your air valve at the lowest point of a cast iron radiator. And these are for cast iron radiators only. Steel convectors are different, cast iron elements are different. But whenever you're dealing with a cast iron radiator, especially if you're dealing with one that has a little height to it, you want to go from bottom and put your air vent at the lowest portion. If you're buying a brand new radiator, that's exactly what you want to do. You want to twist that screw out. If you're buying a refurbished radiator and it has a plug inside of it and you don't know how to get it out, there's ways you can drill it out with a drill bit and then re-tap the threads inside of it. That's something also that I do as well for a lot of my radiators that I've purchased and sold over the years. Now, let's take a look at how this was originally connected. When I first purchased the radiator, and I believe that this is the same radiator that I found sitting under the Brooklyn Bridge years ago, and it was just sitting there with the same connection, with the same rusted paint color. And I just think that somebody found it and sent it to that plumbing supply store and maybe made a quick buck off of it, and then they sold it to me. But when I tried to actually pick it up from the Brooklyn Bridge, or from right underneath the Brooklyn Bridge, which is located right in Lower Manhattan, the shit was so heavy there was just no way in hell I can carry this by myself. And I was a lot younger. I had to be maybe 16, 17 at the time. And there was no way in hell I was going to be carrying this or lugging this heavy thing on no damn train by myself. Now, what I'm talking about is this. Let's just take the 2-pipe steam system for a second. Now, I'm assuming that this was hooked up on a 2-pipe steam system, that this was the feed and this is the return here. The reason why I've come to that conclusion is take a look at where I have my plug at. Take a look at this bushing. The bushing has an opening on the lowest portion of the bushing, meaning that it was made to precision for a 2-pipe steam heating system. And the reason why they made it like this is because they want to put the trap in there and get as much of the condensated water out of the radiator as possible and back into the return. A very brilliant strategy when it comes down to a 2-pipe steam system. The only problem is the setup. Once again, let's just, all this other stuff, the air vent and the bushing up here, let's just take all of this stuff and remove it for a second. So everything here is plugged up and you only got 2 openings. And this is exactly how I purchased this radiator. You got your connection, your inlet over here where you have your cutoff valve, and then you got your outlet down here on your trap valve. A problem behind this is the outcome that you get. When you send up steam, steam is naturally going to flow, or it's going to naturally rise. So you don't have to worry about it making its way to the back or the top of the radiator, because it's naturally going to rise and stay there. Due to the force that is being applied to it by the cutoff valve, it's going to naturally make its way back down. The only problem that you get is that steam is going to look for the easiest route out. Just like anything else, it's going to take the easiest, cheapest way it can get. So whenever you have it in a situation like this, you have end to end. The most effective thing for the steam to do is go straight down. Now with these sections here, what you're trying to do is force that steam down here and actually run it through the rest of this, which is pretty much not going to do. So once again, you're going to have a diagonal slant where you have a certain part of the radiator that gets excessively hot and a good portion of it that is barely warm or even heats up at all. That is another bad connection. You cheat yourself out of heat in so many different ways, it's not funny. Now, anytime you want to do a 2-pipe closed steam system, and even if you do it with an air valve, you still need to do it in this way to make it the most effective, because doing it that way is only going to cheat you with heat. Even if you have an air valve on the radiator, it still doesn't make any sense to do it like that. So what I recommend to anybody that's installing one of these radiators or any radiator on a 2-pipe steam system, there's 2 effective ways you can do it. The most 2 effective ways is have your inlet on the bottom and then your outlet on the bottom, end to end, the lowest point to the lowest point. The reason why I say this is because steam is going to naturally rise. So as you're sending it up through the bottom, it's going to make its way to the top. But at the same time as it's making its way through the top, it also has to make its way down to all of these sections. Or even if it takes the top route first because it floats, because it's lighter, and goes to the back, it still has to come back down. And when you have steam already coming in from the bottom of the radiator, everything gradually comes down, sufficiently heating up all your sections and making its way to the trap valve, and then the condensated water escapes out of the trap, leaving it with nothing but pure steam inside of the radiator. That is the most effective way. The second most effective strategy, and you still get the same results, is you have your main cutoff valve, your inlet up here, and then what you want to do is have your trap down here. The reason why I say this, once again, you have to understand the way steam travels. Steam is only going to take the easiest route out. So whenever you have a situation where you're automatically feeding it from the top, you want to force it to go to places where it would normally have a difficult time to go in. So we already know that the steam is going to make its way back here to the back of the radiator because it's already coming in through the top. So it makes its way to the back, but it automatically has to go back down into the trap valve. So what you pretty much got is gradually, simultaneously, you have the sections heating up all at one time, the front and the back, gradually, simultaneously, and then making their way into the trap and back down to the return line, back into the boiler. That is the most effective way you can do this on a 2-pipe steam heating system. These are the only ways that they should ever be done. I see people do some very bad connections, and I don't understand why people do them, but people really need to understand what they're getting themselves into. You need to know what the flow of heat is, the flow of steam, and how it's going to work. Now, let's just scratch it out for a second. Let's talk about a hot water system, even though this is connected to a steam system. Let's just pretend this radiator is on a hot water system. The most effective way to do a hot water system, and I see people do some real bad connections, and what they'll pretty much do is they'll run their feed from the bottom and then they'll have it escape through the top on one end or end to end. Very bad connection. Once again, you're doing a diagonal effect. So you're not getting the heat all the way over here where it needs to go, because heat's going to rise at the easiest point. And normally when you're first coming in, especially if that's a very long radiator, you're going to have a hard time heating it up. Now, if it's not that long, you might not have that much of a problem and you still might get the same heat. But you will have a better chance of getting much better heat if you run it like this. What you pretty much do is you have your connection or your feed up here. You have your automatic air vent on this side with an elbow, and then you have your vent. And as long as your system is filled with water, you have your return at the bottom. So that way, once again, you're forcing all the heat to come straight to the back and then gradually work its way back down, back into the return, and back down to the boiler. That's the way you want to do a hot water system. The next most effective way to do a hot water system, once again, very similar to an effective way of doing the two-pipe steam system, or exactly the exact same principles, just minus the trap valves and minus the steam outlets. You want to run it end to end on the bottom connection. That is the most effective way to do any type of system, hot water or steam, two-pipe. The most effective way. I'll say it again. You want to run your inlet end, and you want it to escape to end. Pretty much what you do is you have your automatic hot water air vent at the top to bleed out any air or any gases that are sitting inside or trapped inside of the upper portion of the radiator, so your radiator can heat up sufficiently. These are the most effective ways that you can do this. So anytime I install a radiator, I make sure that the radiator has the most sufficient connection as possible. My radiator is running now to the maximum, and as you hear, the valve is quiet now. As I said it would do before, mild hissing and just a little mild venting just to keep the consistent steam flow or the consistent steam passing through all of these sections. So pretty much what we got going on here is you got all of these sections gradually heating up simultaneously at the same time. Everything is passing through each section by section, slowly, and then making its way to the back section and out through the air vent, keeping a nice consistent temperature. I can touch the bottom of the radiator, and the bottom of the radiator is just as hot as the top of the radiator. It might be a little cooler due to the fact that there's condensated water sitting in a certain portion of this, but it's damn near not even noticeable. But that's pretty much the way you want to run any type of heating system. Take a good look at this radiator. This is a perfect example of how to put in a radiator to have it work as efficiently as possible. I assembled this radiator myself. I configured it myself. It was once hooked up on a hot water system, but I configured it to the point where it can run on any type of system that I desire for it to run on. Take a look at how I have my connections. Alright, this is a cast iron element, and you can see that the air valve is located at the bottom, and I customly designed it like this. Now there's a slot right up top where I can screw in an air vent. Right over here, in which I plugged it up. There was a reason that I did that. You see, I tested the radiator on numerous different occasions with the air vent on top, and the same effect that I said or described what happened earlier in the video is the same thing that this did. So what did I do? Rather than getting half-assed heat out of the radiator, I decided to have the connection, the steam inlet, come directly in from the bottom, make its way to the top, and instead of going with the air vent up here or drilling a hole inside of this plug here, what I simply did was I decided to completely cut this plug out and install my elbow and put in my cutoff valve. Very effective strategy. Now I got equally distributed steam inside of the radiator. Very effective, no complaints. The radiator heats up 100% sufficiently, and this room that is heating stays hot as hell. This is how you want to install a radiator. Anytime I do stuff like this, I'll purposely configure it so it works to my best advantage. Because there's never going to be an important time where I get half-ass heat out of the radiator, because I've dealt with that enough times when I was younger, when I was too young to know anything of what I was doing. So like I said, I like to have a nice, consistent, equal flow. Every single section is consistently hot. There's no group of sections on this radiator that's hotter than another. This is pretty much how you want to have it installed. And this was once set up on a hot water system. Now they do make some of these, or they made some that had an air vent that was located toward the bottom. Unfortunately, I didn't get my hands on one of those, so I did what I had to do to make sure that this was going to run in my favor. So I decided to cut this plug out and install this nipple and install this air vent along with the elbow. The same thing with down here, which it didn't have, or no, it did have a bushing in here which had half-inch connections because it was on a hot water system. And basically what I did was I cut the bushings out on each end, and pretty much what I did was install my 1.25 inch nipple with my 1.25 inch by 1 inch elbow along with my 1 inch cutoff valve. And the radiator works sufficiently, it works beautifully, it heats up the room significantly, and this is exactly how you're supposed to have a one-pipe radiator setup.